But for me, weather was something, as I was telling you guys, that I got started in a long time ago when I was a kid here, growing up. Fascinated by severe thunderstorms, snowstorms, tornadoes, and what have you. And it's something that, there were two things I wanted to do when I was younger. One, play basketball in Kentucky. That whole athletic ability thing, you know, being able to shoot and dribble and pass and run, jump, yeah. We got away.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of derailed that thing. Weather, believe it or not, was the other thing that I wanted to do when I was a kid. So thankfully I got to do that one instead of the basketball one. So one out of two, not too bad at all. But weather is cool. If I ask you guys, since you're studying weather, what is weather? Who can tell me exactly what weather is? I'm going to start calling people out. If I don't see a hand, I'm calling somebody out. What's weather?
Come on, Cole, you talk all the time.
Cole in the back?
Yeah.
What's weather, Cole? See, you've been called out, my man.
Basically, rain, stuff like that.
That's right. That's it. No, you're right. You're right. Take them to the window and just show them outside, and basically you've got weather. And what we had a year ago tomorrow was something that is unprecedented around here with the tornado outbreak on March 2nd of last year. And that was something that the tornadoes that we had here in eastern Kentucky, in West Liberty and Salyersville, were tornadoes that have never occurred before in eastern Kentucky on that magnitude. Those are tornadoes that you normally see in Texas or Oklahoma or Kansas. You don't normally get those here in Kentucky. Who thought until last year that the mountains would keep tornadoes away? Let me see your hands. How many of you thought the mountains would keep tornadoes away from here? Now who thinks the mountains will keep tornadoes away from here? Still do? You still got it. They keep the instability down. But just this past summer, there was a tornado in the Rocky Mountains at elevation, I believe it was 11,000 feet. So literally on top of some of the highest peaks in the Rocky Mountains, there was a weak tornado that was captured on video. So the mountains won't do a whole lot in disrupting tornadoes in the right situation. And unfortunately around here, we had the right situation going a year ago. And we had a big storm system that was in the plains, and by a storm I mean an area of low pressure. You guys have been studying low pressure, huh? Low pressure is basically a void in the atmosphere. And think of it like this. Think of your bathtub full of water. All right? The water is the air. You've got the drain plugged up. What's the water doing when the drain's plugged up? It's just sitting there. That's right. So basically, think of this. You've got high pressure. That's high pressure. Now when you take the drain, when you open the drain up, take the thing out of the drain, what happens? All the water rushes to that void that you just created. And you know what you just made? You just made low pressure. You just made a low pressure. So what's happening with the atmosphere is that the water in your bathtub or the wind in the atmosphere is rushing to fill that low pressure. It's trying to balance it out. So you've got a higher pressure here, lower pressure here, so all the wind from high pressure is going to low pressure. So that's how we get weather. And if that stops, then we're all in trouble. Got to have weather to live. And last year we had a low pressure that was out across Missouri that was about as strong as you will see. And it had temperatures behind it in the 20s. And in Kentucky, into Tennessee, the temperatures were in the 70s to near 80. So what happens when you get that much cold air bumping up against a big warm air mass? What's the dividing line in between those two? It's a blue line.
Cold front.
Cold front. Very good. Yep, that's a cold front. Bonus points up here. Yeah. So that's a cold front, and ahead of that cold front is when we had so much instability, or air that is rising, which is what you need to create clouds or thunderstorms or rain or snow. You need the air to rise. You can't really see it, obviously, but the air is rising, and that creates thunderstorms. And the faster that air rises, the stronger those thunderstorms are going to be, the higher up they're going to be. And on that particular day, not only did we have air that was rising, we had air that was rising into winds at the top of those thunderstorms that were coming from another direction. So you had air that was rising, you had strong winds up top, 20, 30,000 feet above where we live, that were going in opposite directions. So if you've got winds that are going in opposite directions, what's going to happen to that thunderstorm? What happens when you spin a top? It's just going to sit and spin, right? So we had clouds that were going up into the atmosphere by 30 or 40,000 feet, and you had winds that were going in different directions. So it was giving those clouds a spin, just like you would spin a top on a table. So, and unfortunately, not those two big thunderstorms in West Liberty and here in Salyersville produce tornadoes, but not every storm that spins produces a tornado. Just happened to be on that particular day we had enough instability to get those thunderstorms to really ramp up and produce tornadoes. Any questions? We are up and running now. How about that? Mr. Holbrook, how are you, sir? Good to see you. Yes, sir. All right. So we got our internet issues out of the way. Let's see, how was it? Was that some good stalling or what, huh? Yeah. You know what? I was about ready to do a little song and dance for you guys until this got ready. So you just missed it, though, right? Okay. Let's see here. I just touched this thing. We should be rolling.
I think you need to maybe say when.
So when? There we go. Okay. remember just a little bit ago when I was telling you about the setup from last year with the storm, the cold air behind it, and the warm air ahead of it? This is a map from around the middle of the day on March 2nd of last year. So this was our low pressure that I was talking to you guys about. Here was our cold front. Look at the temperatures behind this. I mean, you're at 23, 32, 29, 26. Even into Missouri, you had 39 into central Missouri. Yet in northern Kentucky, it was 75. 81 into Nashville, Tennessee. So you had this storm cranking with all the cold air coming in behind it, warm air out ahead of it. So that was that clash of air masses that I was just telling you guys about. Okay, hit it and we'll show you the next slide. The rising air to get a thunderstorm. That's what we had out ahead of that front. This is your basic thunderstorm here that can go up. Around here, those thunderstorms on March 2nd were roughly 30 to 40,000 feet high. And that's way up there. In the plains, you can get those at times that'll top out around 50 or 60,000 feet. But we had something called, most thunderstorms have an updraft. That's winds that it's kind of sucking in on one side, it's spitting out the winds on the other side. If we hit our next map here, you can see why an updraft is important. Because what that will do is sometimes we can get a little horizontal spin in the clouds that you can't really see. Harmless, never reaches the ground because it's kind of horizontal. But that updraft, or that big wind that thunderstorm is sucking in, can sometimes pick that up and make it vertical. And sometimes you can get that tornado. So here's the spin that we were seeing within the thunderstorm on March 2nd that came through Salyersville. You had the winds that were going in opposite directions with height. So from where we live to the top of that thunderstorm, the winds were going in different directions. And that was just basically making that whole thunderstorm spin. And then we got that little bit of spin that was horizontal within the clouds. And because there was so much spin associated with that whole thunderstorm, and we had that updraft tilt that horizontal spin to make it vertical. And once it became vertical, it just kept sucking in the wind on that updraft, which just kept it horizontal to the ground. So it kept that tornado going. Okay, Robbie, Mr. Hoskins, this is our radar from literally about 5 minutes before the tornado hit downtown Salyersville. Here's Salyersville. Here's the thunderstorm. This is what we were looking at. So you see how, you can even see the rotation on a radar picture. You see how it was going around? And it was pulling in winds here. So if you look around the actual tornado path here, you'll notice some of the trees are all laying in the same direction, toward the storm. Because the storm itself was sucking in wind from way away from the tornado. So that's why you see a lot of those trees that were laying down toward the actual tornado. And chances are most of those are laying in this direction because this is what's known as an inflow notch, where it's just sucking in all the wind. And you see the hook here. And if we hit the next slide here, see this little, almost looks like a little ball. So this is a close-up, literally about a minute before it came roaring right over top of where we are. This is what the radar looked like. So this is a little closer. Here's Salyersville. We're roughly right here, obviously. The tornado is right in here. There's the winds being pulled in this direction, and it's just circling around. But what radar can do is it can actually pick up not just precipitation, it can pick up the winds, and in the most extreme thunderstorm cases, it can pick up debris. It can see trees or pieces of people's homes that are being thrown up into the clouds or the wind. So this little ball is what's known as a debris ball. So if you're ever watching us and you hear us, or the Weather Channel or whatever, you've heard them talk about a debris ball showing up on radar. That's what this is, because radar is just sending out a beam that is bouncing back off whatever it finds, back to the radar. And the more bounces back to the radar, it's going to have a higher reflectivity, so it's going to show it up as being stronger. So obviously, if we've got trees that are up there floating around, or we've got, you know, people's roofs or anything up in the clouds, it's going to see that and it's going to bounce it back stronger. So this right here, while the tornado is here, this is the radar actually showing us the damage that was being thrown up into the sky. So it was basically, you know, kind of sucking up debris up into the cloud. And here, some of you in just north of town especially, probably got in on baseball-sized hail that day. This is where that was coming from. It wasn't actually coming from right under or near the tornado. It was coming on the northern side of this. But look at this. I mean, literally, it was the tornado, and then there was nothing. So you get to roughly Lakeville and up toward Royalton, Mason, there was nothing through there. So that's how small of a, or how sharp of a cutoff we had from the actual tornado to getting nothing from that. And if you weren't along that path.
You know, Chris, that night, I can remember thinking back on it, seeing a lot of the weather radar, and I would step out to my garage and simply look at the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I was thinking, like 10 minutes before it happened,
Yeah.
there's nothing here.
Right.
I don't know what they're talking about. I don't see anything. And the fact that you went from literally a blue sky to what happened, it's unbelievable.
It's amazing. And this was the type of tornado. Around in Kentucky, we normally get weak tornadoes that touch down and are on the ground maybe 5 or 6 minutes at the most. The tornadoes, the storm like this that hit Salyersville, the one that hit West Liberty, are ones you see normally out in Kansas or Oklahoma or Texas. And right under the tornado, it didn't rain much. Normally we get tornadoes here that are rain wrapped and are kind of hard to see and are very small and weaker. This is one of those tornadoes that you could see coming for miles, and it stayed on the ground all the way to West Virginia. And that's just something that we do not see around here. And my concern is now going forward, where we had the West Liberty tornado, the Salyersville tornado, that were on the ground for so long that people in Kentucky will get the false sense of security now that you'll be able to see a tornado coming and you'll get warning for it, like we were giving warnings on that day 30 minutes before it was hitting. This was an anomaly. This does not happen normally in Kentucky.
Right.
That's right.
That was one of the things I wanted to ask you while you were here, and I've kind of been teaching this, that after the tornado happened, a lot of people were afraid that this was going to be a regular event.
Yeah.
And I was saying no.
No, that's
I was saying, you know, this is one of those generational, once-in-a-lifetime things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I had it.
And this is more than a once-in-a-lifetime event for Salyersville. You know, in recorded history, we had only had, in Magoffin County, one other tornado that's ever been recorded. And I think that was in 2001, and it just kind of skimmed on top of a mountain and was very weak, knocked a few trees down, and that was it. Nothing like this. Same goes for Wharton County. Now, does that mean you can't get another powerful tornado at some point in your life? No, it just means the odds are way, way against it. And to see something like this, I feel pretty safe to say you'll never see this again in your life in Salyersville. Right. So, you know, next time you hear a thunderstorm come through or a tornado, I mean, you're going to hear, are you going to have another tornado warning for Magoffin County? Yes. You're going to have several. And that just means that the atmosphere could produce a tornado. Doesn't mean it's going to do the same exact thing or even give you a strong tornado like that. It just means that possibility. And now you get, the Weather Service will send out warnings now a little more frequently, just because of people, you know, the nerves are a little afraid still. Let's see, what else we got, Robbie? This is the aerial. This is what it looked like the day after the tornado when we went up in our chopper coming through. This is up here on the parkway. I think this is the health department there, and here's McDonald's. So obviously that's what that radar image, well, this is what it produced. I mean, you've been there. You don't need me to show you a picture. I mean, you saw it firsthand. You know, I drove in that night to see it all, and it was just amazing, the power of it. And these winds, the maximum winds with that tornado here were 160 miles an hour. I mean, that's stronger than Hurricane Katrina. That's stronger than Hurricane Sandy. That's stronger than, well, really any hurricane of your lifetime that's hit the United States. Now, hurricanes are much bigger, so they impact much, you know, larger areas. But in terms of a landfalling hurricane, yeah, 160 miles an hour. This was something else.
How many of you all remember that scene? How many of you all remember that? When you went through town the next time after it happened, how many of you remember that? Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah. And who's still worried about something like that happening again? I mean, we all are, right? It's just natural. It's just natural. So, the first time you had a thunderstorm after that, how scary was that?
Yeah.
Pretty wild, wasn't it?
I was telling Amber outside that it would cloud up the rest of the school year, and kids were asking, is it going to happen again? I'm like, no. I really don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was amazing was very few injuries.
Yeah, and you know, and people are asking, have tried to come up with ideas on why that was. And my theory on it is, by the time the tornado, our tornado hit Salyersville, we had heard about what happened in West Liberty, or we're hearing about it. It was all over the news at that time, right? You know, everybody was going crazy because, you know, a tornado destroyed West Liberty. Right. So, my theory is people here took this, you know, you got a warning on this at least 20 minutes before the tornado actually hit. The warning was issued way in advance. The tornado was actually on the ground in Wolfe County when the warning was issued for Magoffin County. So my theory is people here were seeing and hearing what happened in West Liberty and said, okay, if it can happen there, you know, Salyersville, West Liberty, very similar cities. So why couldn't it happen here? So people took this much more seriously than they would have had West Liberty not been hit an hour before.
Right.
I really believe that. I think there would have been fatalities here had West Liberty not been hit an hour before Salyersville. At least that's my theory on it.
I agree.
So people took it seriously, and you had good warning on it. But again, you're not going to get a 30-minute heads up on a tornado again.
So Chris, was this one tornado or was it several?
Several. Actually, hit the slide here. I've got, let's see, I've got a slide. Here we go. Now this is kind of confusing. Okay. The red that you see here, those are the different tornadoes that touched down on March 2nd. Those are all the tornadoes. Here's the one that was in Indiana, Henryville, Indiana. And you could track this, you could track the storms. It started here, produced a tornado all the way into Kentucky, stopped producing a tornado for a little while, and then produced a tornado again, same storm.
So they break up and reform?
Yeah, they basically, the tornado will lift up for a little while sometimes, and if it's a strong enough storm and conditions are right, it'll put it back down. Now, here are the tornadoes in Morgan County, Magoffin County. The West Liberty one started in Menifee County. It worked all the way to near Charleston, West Virginia. It was on the ground for a little over 80, almost 90 miles. It was the West Liberty tornado was the longest tracked tornado in the entire country last year. It was on the ground the longest of any tornado in the United States all of last year. Salyersville tornado was in the top 5. This was on the ground approximately 49 miles from far southeastern Wolfe County, all the way through Magoffin, Johnson, Martin, and finally, as it crossed over into Mingo County, West Virginia, it lifted back up into the cloud. So 49-mile track, and at its peak here, it was 3/4 of a mile wide. So, you know, that's unheard of anywhere in Kentucky, let alone obviously around here. And the same goes for the West Liberty tornado. Now you see all the little brown boxes here, the little tan boxes? All of those are tornado warnings that were issued that day. So those are all warnings. So everybody in those warnings thought a tornado was going to hit them at one point. But look at only the areas that got the tornadoes that actually touched down. You see how the warnings far outnumber the actual tornadoes that touched down. So at our station in the Weather Service, we have the most powerful radars known to man. The radars can look in the storms, they can look in the clouds, and they can see the spin. But one thing no radar can actually tell you is if a tornado is actually getting down to the ground. We can tell you that a storm is spinning. Any storm that spins can produce a tornado. So you see a spinning storm, you're going to see a tornado warning that's issued from the National Weather Service. So that's why you have all these warning boxes that were issued that day. But not all of them produce tornadoes. The only way we really know a tornado is on the ground, we see that debris ball sometimes, you get a good idea that it's producing damage and a tornado's on the ground. Or if you guys see it and we know about it and you let us know.
So do tornadoes generally move west to east like weather systems?
They do. A lot of times they will have a, just kind of like these. If you look, there's more of a southwest to northeast orientation to those. So you can actually see how the tornado watches or the warnings that day were oriented southwest to northeast, because that's how those storms were moving on that day. So more than likely, look to the southwest of you, and that's where the strongest storm will be coming from. But yeah, so just to show you that when a tornado warning is issued, doesn't mean it's going to produce a tornado. It just means that it very well could.
So most of the warning areas remain in.
That's right. But so that, you know, and that's something we fight every year, is, well, we issue all these warnings, but not everybody got them. And I can tell you on March 2nd, you know, when we're on TV and we're telling people about the tornadoes to take cover in Salyersville, West Liberty, or, you know, East Bernstein here in Laurel County or Northern Kentucky, you know, we're reporting fatalities and stuff like that. You know what was happening in our newsroom? People from these areas were calling, complaining because we were cutting it over a Wheel of Fortune. It's true.
Yeah.
Sad but true. Is that while you're giving people life, and you know what they say? Well, that's not my house. So next time, that's when you're like, you know what? Maybe next time it will be.
Yeah.
Hope not, but then what are you going to say? So,
That's sad.
it is sad.
That is.
But we face that on a daily
See,
basis.
that's part of the news business I would never have known had you not known that.
Yeah. And literally when I first, right after this in April, on the night of the Indiana UK basketball game, y'all may remember this, there were a couple of tornado warnings, and it came out with about 30 seconds to go before halftime in UK, Indiana, and the NCAA tournament, which is on our station.
Did it have to be then?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I didn't see, you know, and so I didn't see anything on radar. I didn't see anything that was strong. So we went on literally as the horn was sounding for halftime to give tornado warnings. This was the first tornado warnings after March 2nd. And people were calling, "You're not going to cover the game up, are you?" Which we weren't, but, you know, it was halftime. So, yeah, welcome to my world. So what questions do you guys have?
Oh, man.
I mean, serious.
That's awful.
So what we have, we come up with a solution. So we'll put the game on side by side. Put me in a little box somewhere, you know, talking,
Yeah.
picture in a picture. That way we, you know, appease everybody. unless it's really, really bad. Then, sorry, basketball, even in Kentucky. But yeah, our number one job is to save lives. I mean, it's to protect lives and property. What questions you guys have after
Weather questions.
seeing this?
What do you want to know?
Weather questions.
What do you
TV
always want to ask the weather guy?
TV questions. You want to know? You want to know how much makeup I wear? What do you want? Come on.
Yeah.
Not enough. Yeah, listen. There's only so much you can do for this. All right. Yeah.
You got your own tornado stations?
Yeah. You know, let me show you a little tornado.
Yeah.
You guys want to see one? All right. This is our little tornado demonstrator here, and I'm going to turn part of it on for you guys. See, I was about ready to forget the main act here. They don't want to see, they want to see this. So you see how we have a little spin here. In this, think of this as where we live. Think of this as the top of the cloud, or the base of the cloud. So we have air that's going in different directions. So we've got a little spin, but it doesn't mean it's going to produce a tornado.
So is that just a bad storm?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most storms will have a little circulation with them, but not all of them have a strong enough updraft. Remember that sucking wind up to really pick that spin and make it connect from the cloud to the ground. So let me switch it here. So all of a sudden, now let's get that updraft going. So as you get that to go, then it's going to produce a little tornado. And that's what we've got here with this. Now I can disrupt that. That's literally, though, what you're seeing me do with this is how conditions have to be 100% perfect to get a tornado. Any little bit of a breeze that shouldn't be there, tornado's not going to form. So to get a tornado to form is one of the more amazing aspects of the atmosphere.
So that's why you should look at the event last year as a generational
That's right.
anomaly.
That's right. And yeah, and even if we get another tornado around here, it's for it to be like last year would be. I would feel secure in saying no. It wouldn't be that strong at all. You know, those two tornadoes that ripped through West Liberty and Salyersville were among the strongest to ever hit the state of Kentucky, and certainly the two strongest to ever hit eastern Kentucky. Period. On record. And you've lived through it.
Well, I'll tell you what I told the kids. My grandparents had a story about a flood
Yeah.
from maybe the 30s,
37.
and there was some news pictures of downtown so flooded that they had fishing boats, you know, going through town. And you know, when your grandparents tell you that kind of thing, you're sort of like, yeah, I guess. And what this is going to be, you guys are going to grow up. You're going to have kids. You're going to, you know, you're going to tell them
Yeah.
about this tornado
That's right.
last year, and they're going to look at you and say, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had to be there. So that's, you know, expect that. They're not going to get it. You had to be there.
Yeah. The one thing, do you know of anyone here that actually has video or pictures of the tornado itself?
You know, we have some footage here on the security
yeah, I've
cameras
seen
around
those.
the building.
But does anyone actually have a picture of the tornado in Salyersville?
I've not known it.
I think because it was at
It
night.
was at night. I have yet to find one.
Yeah.
I've looked and looked and looked, or even video.
Yeah, there would have been quite a few more, I'd imagine, had it even been at dusk.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Given the fact that it occurred, you know, a little after 7. Yeah.
There's a video on YouTube of the tornado in Salyersville that forming. It lasts like 5 seconds. So
Really?
yeah,
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've seen that one. So there is one from Salyersville. Oh,
I'm pretty sure it's Salyersville.
that's neat. Yeah.
My cousin has a picture of a tornado from West Liberty.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that one hit about 5:30, 6 o'clock there. So that one is well photographed. And if you watched us last night, we actually had new video that was never seen before from there, from one of the restaurants. And you hear, and people are taking shelter. It was one of the pizza places down there. So you see all these people that are getting together in this little storage area of this pizza place, and then the lights go out, so the video goes out, but the audio keeps running. So you hear the pizza place being torn apart around them with people screaming and stuff like that. So yeah, That's kind of sobering.
The tornado being so wide and our terrain the way it is on that, we could take a good picture of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And you know, that's another thing too that I didn't bring up. But with our terrain, with the mountains, it's hard to see a tornado coming at you until it's right on you. That's right. I mean, you know, out in the plains or even in central Kentucky, Lexington, and you know, you can see for a few miles. Here, not so much. What else? What other questions you got?
Does anybody have any tornado stories? You wanna tell us where you were or what you were doing? I basically went to my basement. I mean, I did what I always thought was the right thing to do. And I took my wife and my girl and went downstairs. And, you know, it just sounded like a really large train that just went over, and you could tell when it passed. I knew it was okay to go upstairs. Now, I didn't know what I was going to find when I got upstairs. I remember getting to the top of my stairway and reaching for the door handle and just, you know, you stop and like do that little prayer. Because when you open the door, is there going to be a house there or not? Because I knew what moved over was major. I just didn't know how major. And, you know, once I got to town the next day, I cried. I mean, you know. Well, if I didn't, I came as close to crying as you can. Because that was my town, and I'm looking at it, and it's gone. Yeah. It doesn't Ohio get more.
Ohio they get more tornadoes than we do, although we're catching up quickly.
Up by the Sandusky, Ohio.
Sandusky? Oh, you're up north then, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I used to live, somewhere near there.
Here in Kentucky, our average number of tornadoes over the past 10 years on a yearly basis is now up to 27. That's what we average now in Kentucky. Now, 20 or 30 years ago, we averaged about 15. So the number of tornadoes in our part of the world is increasing.
That's interesting. Is there a why there?
A little warmer climate, a little more instability. But if you look at an overall map, you know, Tornado Alley is associated with Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and places like that.
Right.
But there's a new, not a new Tornado Alley, but it's called Dixie Alley is kind of the name of it. And it extends from parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, down the Mississippi River through Arkansas and places like that. In this area, from where we live, Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, to Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, which they got, you know, hammered a couple years ago, which you guys may have done stuff with. We're now getting more tornado outbreaks farther east than where we used to get them typically in Tornado Alley into Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, places like that.
So the answer is global warming.
Potentially, yeah. I mean that won't be known obviously for a while, you know, but yeah, I mean, we are indeed seeing more extreme events as you guys are seeing firsthand on a daily basis, obviously, with your job and stuff. And but yeah, I mean, even here in Kentucky, when we look at the ice storms, the tornadoes, the floods. You know, we weren't supposed to have floods again after the cut through.
Right.
You know, yeah, we got it and.
Till my garage.
Yeah. But let's see, we were driving down today, I was telling them about the Memorial Day flood back in '04. And, you know, I mean, that was...
I had just moved into my house, and I had this horrible feeling that it was just going to wash me.
Yeah, I mean, and that, you know, and so yeah, so extreme events are on the rise. But
now the question that I know everybody's wondering, or at least they're going to ask me in a day or two, is what's the deal with the snow? We can't get any. I mean, we're like behind, we're like 5 inches behind for the season.
You are, and between Lexington and Cincinnati, they're normal, and they've had a little above normal up in Covington and Maysville, places like that. But yet here, it's been a little below normal. Last year was horrible.
Well, why wasn't it like the 70s? I know when I grew up. I mean,
right,
we had snows, man.
That's right. I mean, right, we did. But now, if you go back 2 years ago, though, you got out in the middle of June.
Yeah, I know.
Snow.
I know. I remember.
We had in the.
But now, Chris, what it was then? I know the year you're talking about.
Yeah.
My last day was June 23rd.
That's right. Yeah. And
it wasn't that it was one big event. You got like a half-inch a day.
Yeah.
Like for a month.
Yeah. We two things have happened here. in the wintertime. Let me use Lexington as an example. Lexington hasn't set a record low temperature in the winter, in December, January, February, since February of 1996. We haven't had a record low temperature, think about that, a record wintertime temperature set in Lexington in 17 years.
So it's getting warm
It's getting warm
and staying warm.
and staying warm. Now, does that mean you're not going to have some years like what we did a few winters ago? No, because you will. You know, I mean, you'll get, and eventually our time will be up and we'll get a blizzard. We're in the longest drought, not only for record-setting cold, but a major snowstorm too. We haven't had one really since the late 90s.
Yeah, right.
So the cold, the record cold, and the snowstorms slash blizzards are both running kind of parallel to one another in history around here. I mean, they haven't occurred since the 90s.
You know, one time, I'm gonna say about 10 years ago, I emailed Tony Cavalier
Oh yeah.
at SAZ, and basically my email was just asking him. I told him, I said, you know, I took all these night classes, and you know, I loaded up all my work, and I said, what I was expecting, this was a spring semester, I
Sure.
said, what I was expecting was a couple of good snowstorms to cancel some class and give me a break. What, you know, what's the deal here? And then he actually emailed back.
Did he?
Yeah, he mentioned
That's
that,
rare for him, by the way.
and he mentioned it on the telecast that
Yeah.
night, but he said that all these forces have to come into play to create the snowstorm that you're looking for, and it made sense.
Yeah,
I was
and
no less disappointed.
right, absolutely. And you know, now does that? Now some of it is just pure dumb luck that we have to hit too, because I mean they've had snowstorms. Louisville had a 2-foot snowstorm back in March of 2008. Western Kentucky had a Christmas Eve blizzard in 2004 that produced nearly 2 feet of snow.
That's fun.
So we've just kind of been dancing a little
See,
bit.
we don't look at snow totals in feet.
Right, yeah, no, right, we haven't done that since 96.
Yeah.
That's the blizzard of 96 around here. But now, you know, don't give up hope yet. March has produced some of the biggest blizzards ever in eastern Kentucky. And one was 20 years ago, next week.
93.
The blizzard of 93, middle of March. That was I believe it was the 13th through the 16th. You had 40-mile-an-hour winds and about 2 feet of snow.
And it got like 40 below too, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it shut everything down. The colleges were on spring break, and they were trying
It's cold as
the
that
kids were
every
still
day.
trying to go on spring break, and they were stranded on the interstate for days.
I-75.
Yeah, that's right, south.
Well,
But
Chris,
I'll work on trying to get you guys to snow, all right?
I appreciate you being here. Awesome, going back.
Yeah.
Guys, you've been real good today. I appreciate it.
thank you all.
I'd say Chris would come back if I asked him.
Yeah, we'd love to come back.
Um,
I won't bring a camera crew with me all the time, but you know,
That's
sometimes
fine.
they just send me solo.
we're just glad to see you. Let's give him a little applause, guys.